Welcome to this explainer. Look, today we're jumping right into something that almost all of us deal with, yet we profoundly misunderstand it. We're talking about anxiety. Specifically, we're going to unpack a really fascinating framework from Tim Bach. He's a guy who spent years battling debilitating social anxiety before dedicating the next decade of his life to helping others overcome it. And its core message? Well, it's completely counterintuitive. We're going to explore why trying to utterly destroy your anxiety is actually the root of your suffering, and how just shifting your perspective can absolutely transform your daily life.
Okay, so let's just start by acknowledging a pretty hard truth here. If you've ever dealt with anxiety, your very first instinct is almost always to just run away, right? Tim Bach used to literally arrange his entire life around avoiding social situations. If panic flared up, he'd retreat to safety, leaning on endless distraction techniques just to escape that horrible, sinking feeling that something awful was about to happen. But here's the thing. Avoiding those situations or distracting yourself from the panic, it simply doesn't work. Trying to fight or flee from these feelings is a massive mistake. You literally do not get rid of anxiety by trying to get rid of it. But wait, what if we actually could get rid of it? What would a world completely without anxiety look like? Imagine achieving that ultimate dream of zero anxiety. Sounds pretty amazing at first, doesn't it? But if you really truly think about it, society would pretty much grind to a halt. This very feeling is exactly what tells us when something is worth demanding our attention. Without it, nobody would show up to work, nobody would study for their exams, and honestly, nobody would even bother getting washed and dressed up to make a good impression on a first date, a date they probably would have completely forgotten to turn up to anyway.
When you break it down, it highlights a pretty stark reality. There are really only two distinct groups of people who never ever feel anxious. Group 1, dead people. You know, they've got enough on their plate, they don't need to worry about anything else. Group 2, psychopaths, people who completely lack the ability to have any concern whatsoever for the consequences of their actions. Neither of those is exactly an aspirational lifestyle, for sure. So, if being entirely free of anxiety is actually a terrible idea, why do we view our own anxiety so negatively? Well, it's because when it spikes, it feels absolutely horrible, and it can start to totally dominate our existence.
So, what do we naturally do when a feeling takes over our lives? We turn to doctors for a cure. But there is a massive bottleneck in the medical system. When you go to a general practitioner, you generally get somewhere between 8 to 11 minutes for an appointment. That's it, 8 to 11 minutes. That is severely limited, and it is nowhere near enough time to properly diagnose, unpack, and treat deeply complex emotional issues.
Let's break down why this traditional medical route often fails us. Doctors are fantastic, they literally save lives every single day, but treating complex anxiety is often not what they signed up for. First, as you just mentioned, they have extremely limited time with you. Second, they're trained in general medicine. To become a true mental health specialist, a doctor has to train for 5 or 6 extra years to become a psychiatrist. Third, they just lack immediate counseling resources. They might put you on a 12 to 16-week waiting list. But let's be real, if you're desperate today, waiting 3 or 4 months is just not helpful. This often leaves medication as the only remaining option on the table, a mere band-aid solution that comes with unpredictable side effects and this brand new fear of becoming totally dependent on a pill. But honestly, perhaps the most damaging result of seeking a medical cure for a non-medical problem is what happens before you even walk out of the doctor's office. You often leave slapped with an anxiety issue label, or you're diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. And what does that do? It just gives you a brand new thing to panic about. In thousands of conversations with sufferers, their biggest fear was simply how anxious they felt and wondering if it would ever stop. And that fear, it's almost entirely fueled by being given this medical label.
So, we have to completely flip our paradigm here. We must stop viewing our natural human feelings as some sinister illness. Anxiety is not a disease. Anxiety is an emotion. And every emotion is important. It has a purpose, and it's a vital part of the human experience. Treating it like an illness is exactly what traps us in that endless cycle of suffering.
So if it's not an illness, what exactly is it? Well, here is the working definition we really need to adopt. Anxiety is simply the emotion that tells us when something is too important to simply lose focus of. It's that little voice of concern about an upcoming event that absolutely refuses to be ignored. Think about it. If you didn't have this specific emotion, you'd be one feeling short of a full set. Actually, lacking this emotion entirely, that would be the actual disorder.
The paradigm shift, your mind as a ship.
To truly stop suffering, we really need a better way to understand our emotional responses. So imagine your mind has two distinct forces.
First, you have the captain. The captain represents the logical, rational, conscious part of your thinking. It knows exactly where you want to go in life and why. But then you have the crew. The crew is your subconscious. They're in charge of your automatic responses, your deep-rooted belief systems, and all your emotions. The captain might point to a destination on a map, but it's the subconscious crew with their hands on the actual sails and the steering wheel. They steer the ship by triggering emotional responses like fear or anger to get you to move away from perceived danger or to take urgent action.
And here is the absolute secret to understanding your anxiety. Your crew operates on one very simple underlying principle. They are constantly, always trying to find the best strategy to keep you happy and safe. Even when your crew makes you feel awful or triggers incredibly harsh, self-destructive thoughts like, I'm just not good enough or I'm gonna fail, they aren't trying to sink your ship. No, they are simply trying to steer you away from stormy seas they genuinely fear you cannot survive. They're just trying to protect you.
Which brings us to a massive, glaring contradiction. If the crew is just trying to keep us safe, why do we constantly treat them as the enemy? Why are we always trying to throw our own crew members overboard? Well, it's mostly because the crew bases their decisions on things you learn throughout your entire life, which are often heavily outdated lessons from when you were very young. Because of this, yeah, they make mistakes. They might trigger a massive fear response for a completely minor social event, but just because they get it wrong sometimes, that doesn't make them the enemy. When you treat them like the enemy, you're essentially telling yourself your mind is broken, and that just utterly destroys the morale of your own ship.
3 steps to take control. Once you really understand that your crew is just trying to help, you can completely change how you interact with them. So here are 3 actionable steps you can take today. Step 1. Refuse the illness label. You absolutely must reject the idea that you are fundamentally broken. Decide, right now, not to feel anxious about feeling anxious. Step 2. Listen to the crew. Look, if you ignore a crew member who has an important message, they're going to start shouting. Anxiety is just your crew shouting at you. Listen to the underlying message so your subconscious can quiet down and the logical captain can actually be heard again. And step 3, always be kind to them. Stop beating yourself up. A demoralized crew creates low self-esteem, which makes every tiny little challenge trigger anxiety. Build your self-esteem through kindness, and your crew will feel empowered to sail smoothly.
Now, when you finally achieve this balance, something magical happens. Anxiety doesn't disappear. And remember, we don't want it to. Instead, it turns into what Tim Box cleverly calls the Friday dustbin day effect. He notes that every single Friday morning, he wakes up feeling just a tiny bit anxious. Why? Well, because it's trash day. His crew gives him just a tiny whisper of anxiety to remind him to take out the bins, and once he does it, the feeling is totally gone. It's not debilitating, it's just a helpful, quiet little whisper proving his crew is actively working to keep his life on track.
So, when we step back and look at the wider conversation around mental health today, we see 2 popular yet entirely wrong extremes. Myth 1 says anxiety is an incurable illness. It's just the way you're permanently wired, and you're stuck with it forever. Myth 2 says it's not even real, it's all in your head, and you just need to get over it. Both of these are incredibly unhelpful. The truth lies directly in the middle. The feelings are intensely real. We certainly don't ask for them, but we absolutely have the power to change how they affect us by accepting them as a natural, trusted friend rather than a hostile enemy. Which leaves us with one final, deeply empowering question. If you are feeling a bit of anxiety right now, whether it's about a big presentation at work, a relationship, or literally just taking the bins out, what is it trying to tell you today? Remember, if you feel anxious, that is actually a profoundly good thing. It means you are alive, it means your crew is on duty, and a part of you is actively trying to protect something that is deeply important to you. So don't run from it, don't fight it. Just have a listen. It's only here to help.